So the time of recording is the first day of the Legion Dragon Skill part of Kingdom Celebration. This is of course where you can use your treasure keys from the event to spin this wheel, and then you can either get army skill fragments from here or the various milestones throughout. So you can get 10 of these keys per event for free effectively. You can get 5 for diamonds, 5 for these werewood leaves, and the rest you'll have to buy 3 black diamonds. So it is a fairly premium event in that sense, because you're mostly going to have to be buying these keys through black diamonds, but you can get enough long-term free-to-play means of that 10 per event. The best way to do it is probably saving and then spinning 55 times and just repeatedly doing that. In June and December, these skills are also discounted, so these ones here that cost 300 will go down to 250. Reinforcement will go down to 330, and anything that's new will retain its value. So this one, for example, was new during the last discount, so that stayed at 300. Now, when this event popped up, I, within like a few hours, received, I think, 2 or 3 DMs from people in my alliance asking what skill to get next, basically. And I answer questions on this pretty much every time the event comes up, so I figured a video on it would be a good idea, maybe a series of videos going into the specifics of each dragon skill and analysing what they actually do in reports and then comparing them against each other. And I do have a few ideas around that, specifically comparing stuff like tear versus follow-up, which I've spent like an hour or 2 testing tonight. Weakness as well is kind of awkward to put a value on. I've done a bunch of testing on that. Put health values on the reduction, accounting for the uptime of the buffs, of course, and whatnot. Yeah, I'll go into more specifics on that stuff in future videos. This one I want to keep mostly simple, where you can just look at something and have a general idea of where to go next. So I was thinking of how to format this video, and the idea I settled on was just making a chart, because I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone of that. I could make a video, but then also just put it on my Alliance Discord and let people refer to that rather than having to constantly answer questions about that. So the majority of these top picks are very similar, and they are very similar throughout. There's a pretty obvious trend throughout each of these. It's obviously split by synergy type, and they pretty much all follow a very similar pattern because of that, because whilst there are various differences in the rankings, where you see like follow-up is here, but then tear is here and follow-up is below, that's because tear, flame, and follow-up are pretty much the same skill, just for each synergy type. So tear procs off weakness attacks for every 10 weakness attacks. Flame is a bleed skill for every 10 additional attacks triggered by allied troops. Pretty much going to get that from Sonara. This can proc off Kravras as well, but he will not cause enough additional attacks to actually get consistent value out of this. It's still better than nothing if you're running a Kravras bow build, but it'll pretty much proc like once a fight, and I really wouldn't overly think much of this synergizing with your build, honestly. And follow-up procs off Commander active, so this will be the female synergy skill for dragon follow-up attacks, and it will quite heavily rely on Layla, causing more opportunities for this to proc. And on the same note, there is Strong Assault, which is the female damage increaser. There is Weakness, which is the weakness damage increaser, and there is Bleed, which is the bleed damage increaser also. So that makes ranking all of these on a priority list pretty easy, because it makes it fairly interchangeable, whereas like female will want the female follow-up, weakness will want the weakness follow-up, bleed will want the bleed follow-up, and so on. But if we go from the top, reinforcement is first in my rankings on all 3. Reroute will be second on all 4 actually, and rally size, if you're a rally lead, is third on all 4 also. So when it comes to reinforcement, first of all, what this will do, if we look at that, is at rank 10, it will give you... Effectively at 9, this will give you 60,000 extra army size. And there's lots of little intricacies to this, so there's no rally limit on it. If you look at something like Reroute, it has a 15% rally cap, as you can see here. So just like 1.5 level 9 Reroute skills basically will cap this effect. Reinforcement doesn't have a rally cap. So if you have, say, the rally leader start a rally with the skill, and then 7 fillers send 600k or more troops, the rally will in effect gain 480,000 extra troops. And the way these troops work is they're ghost troops, so because they don't actually exist, when they die in combat, they will actually have loss prevention tied to them, because when they die, because they don't exist, effectively nothing dies. So that is how you'll see in stuff like GB, whales going to like 100, 200 kill streaks, because you have to break through their 60,000 ghost troops from the reinforcement skill to actually reduce their march size. And until you start knocking their march size down, they're just going to keep tearing through people. Even if they're at 0 resilience, if they have really premium synergistic stuff, like if they're bleed with John and really high base attack or something like that, that alone will be enough to just keep tearing through even decent mid-spending players. So for all those reasons, reinforcement, I think, is the best. It also has army size as its strategic attribute. I know people don't really care much about Siege of Winterfell or All Out War, but this is the best strategic attribute as well. It vastly outscales any of the other strategic attributes. And I think the game also agrees with me that it's the best skill by the fact it's still 400 fragments to purchase it. I think that's a pretty good telling sign. I have done videos on this in the past, back in 2021 as well, talking about all the specifics of the skill, if you want to refer back to that also. Everything about it is true. You can kill rebel camps of 0 dead by letting the ghost troops all tank. Tons of little intricacies like that, which makes it the best option in my opinion. Reroute is the OG skill, I guess. This is what everyone was advised to get when it first came out. And realistically, it still is, in a vacuum, the first or second best skill in pretty much all scenarios. If you're rallying someone and you don't have Reroute in your rally, and they have like 15, 18 million troops, this will actually be significantly better than even reinforcement. So there is some situational effects throughout all of this, determining which is better or worse, especially this tab with the anti-counter and the counter and the casualty rate increase or decreasing stuff. Situational elements affect this tiering a lot. But if we stick in Reroute for now, just as a general idea, what I was saying about reinforcement not having a rally cap, Reroute doesn't have a troop cap, so that lets it hit so many more troops than basically any other dragon skill can. So this will give you like 400k more troops in a rally. This will add 60k. But Reroute, if you're rallying, say, a castle with 18 million troops at home, and you have a fully capped Reroute in your rally, that will reroute the 1.8 million from the 10% and another 900k. So it will reroute 2.7 million troops out of the fight, which removes so much damage that will be being dealt to you. Because imagine 2.7 mil cavalry or something hitting into an imp frontline. That is such a huge amount of damage you're removing from the situation. So because of that, you can retain your own numbers at a higher level for longer, and that will let you deal more damage into them, of course, and that'll let you kill more as a result. So Reroute, still very, very high tier. The one little footnote on Reroute I'd say is pretty much everyone has it, like especially like old gifted accounts that are now free to play or people that don't spend anymore and whatnot. So this will cap very easily in rallies, like way easier than anything else listed here, particularly the follow-up flame tear assist tier of stuff, since that's more new. So that is one negative attached to it, but if we're just looking at it as its individual skill, it has to be up there in second, in my opinion. Then, rally size, you see it has a very different ranking pretty consistently, depending on if you're a rally leader or not. If you are a rally leader, you could argue this should be higher, honestly. It may well could be, but I've put the other stuff above it just because of their more universal values. They'll help more in solo attacking, GB, stuff like that. Again, like reinforcement, this also has the best strategic skill attached to it, so this will help you rack up elims and all-out war and Siege of Winterfell as well, just as another extra bonus to it. The reason for this being this high isn't very complicated. Size is king in this game. 400k extra troops will just provide more damage than anything below it on the list will provide. There's a reason why everyone chases army size so much. And then it starts to get a bit more interesting and actually varies depending on the synergy type. So for the most part, this is pretty obvious. You just pick, in the first place after this point, the corresponding synergy type dragon follow-up ability. So with female, that's follow-up that procs off commander actives. With weakness, it's tear, which procs off weakness attacks. With bleed, it will be flame, which procs off extra normal attacks. The only one to talk about here really will be the female weakness hybrid. I felt it was important to include this because, like, which side do you have bias to in this situation? So what I'm envisioning here is something like Jaime, Lats, Andrea, Layla, and then 3-star Rhea or something like that. So it's 4 females, but it's got the healing enabler there, and it's got Jaime to proc weakness attacks. And what I've found from doing all my testing tonight on this is tear is disproportionately better than both follow-up and flame. You don't really have a choice here with flame, so it's only really competing against follow-up. But in terms of choosing between these two, tear will proc so many more times, and that's even if you're just doing single weakness compared to like a Layla composition with 4 or 5 females. If you're doing double or triple weakness, this triggers up to 10 times tooltip will be very relevant, because I had, for example, a double weakness test against a rebel group which procced 15 times. So all those procs past 10 didn't actually do a follow-up attack because of this cap. And no matter how I tested follow-up, it just never reached that point at all. And I think that that's a very good reason why it doesn't have that cap text attached to it itself, whereas tear does. Because tear, you just get so many more procs coming off because of how it works. And of course it will directly increase in how effective it is the more lines of weakness you run also. But even as one weakness enabler in like Lats, without weapon even, it was still consistently testing better than follow-up with Layla was for me across 4, 5, 6 tests in a row by quite a big margin as well. So tear for me is very much the priority if you're running a hybrid, and weakness builds will benefit from tear way more than bleed will benefit from flame, and female will benefit from follow-up. Maybe with high-leveled Sonara weapon or Layla weapon this will change, because of course with Jaime, when you level his weapon up, you don't get more weakness attacks, you just increase the damage. Whereas with Sonara, you'll get more normal attacks, and with Layla, you'll get more commander actives. So perhaps if you have like the 4-star weapons, this will change, but when you only have them all at base without weapon, tear is way, way, way better. Past that, I think assist is a pretty clear pick in 5th after that for all builds also. If you want to know the specifics of why I think this, you can refer to my whole video I did in assist, going into all the maths on it and how it works as practical army size in combat, and just how much of a difference that actually makes, even aside from the healing numbers themselves. I will say, again, like I said with tear, this will proc so many more times if you're in a weakness hybrid or a weakness build and have tear than it will with pure female or pure bleed. I think honestly testing this is another reason why weakness might perform so well at the mid-spender level, because these two skills together just work so well together compared to any alternative options for the other synergy types. For the hybrids, you can then have follow-up in the next part. This will be consistent across weakness and the weakness female hybrid. It is good, it's just much lower value than tear will be, so it goes a bit below that in assist in terms of prioritization. And you have to remember, when you get it here, it will then exaggerate assist more. So it isn't just the damage you're getting out of follow-up, it's both the damage you're getting from follow-up, but also allowing you to cause more assist procs as well, which is a big part of its value for these builds. Then after this, it will be the damage increasing ones, bleed for bleed, strong assault for female, and weakness for weakness. Weakness is sort of awkward to put a value on. I've tested it. If at 9, probably around somewhere between 15 and 30% health reduction as a rough value. It's very hard to put an actual one rule fits all value to that though, because it changes according to so many factors, of course. If you heal earlier with a Lat, Senzo, or Drake weapon, how many times you break through lines and actually kill the line you're hitting. That is one thing that I think is a bit weird about this skill, and I think is probably why it has that reputation of not being that good, is because it basically has anti-synergy with the weakness build, because the way it works is you stack the health reduction debuff. Where am I going? It stacks the health reduction debuff onto the lineup. The problem is, if you want to maximize the value of that, you then want that lineup to last as long as possible so you can keep hitting into the debuff. But the way weakness works is you keep hitting with all 5 lineups, that same lineup, until it dies. So weakness attack itself works to kill the lineup as quick as possible, whereas this skill wants that lineup to last as long as possible. So this is sort of anti-synergistic with itself, which is a bit odd in my opinion. It still has alright value though. For weakness, I'd put it above strong assault, just because you're not getting additional commander active procs. For female, in the hybrid, I swapped that around. This tiering is probably the one I'm least sure about in this entire ranking, so you can perhaps make your own decisions there. But I think as a general rule, this is probably how I'd look at it. And this stuff up is probably going to be the bulk of our dragon skills, and the stuff below that isn't of as much importance. Everything in this tier, as I said previously, is just so situational. So, for example, these two won't do anything in something like AC, where troops can't die. These two won't do anything if there's no countering going on in a fight, if you're facing bows or whatever. This won't do anything. If it doesn't proc, it's just a pure RNG mechanic that can potentially save speed ups and resources, but it won't help determine who wins a fight. So if you're happy to just eat the resource and healing speed costs, this is basically pointless. Although I'd say this is probably the one I see ran most commonly. But I think in this tier it really depends on the situations you find yourself in most. If you're really committing to mono and you don't want to run an off-troop type at all, maybe anti-counter in that situation will be good, because you really want to stop being able to be countered as easily. And as I said, healing I see get used a lot by whales. If you're like soloing buildings and AC and you get this to proc on a mono T5 march or something, and you can get that a couple of times throughout a match, this can save hundreds and hundreds of days of speeds. But on the same note, if it doesn't proc and you don't get the luck of the draw, it's going to be totally useless. Where is that skill? Yeah, so at max it will heal 100% of the troops. It's just only a 20% chance. If I was picking between these 5, I would get Legion healing, so you can take that for what it's worth, but very situational, all of these. This tier is basically just skills that give total attack or total attack reduction. Tear, bleed, flame, weakness is all total attack or total attack reduction. And the reason they're down there is pretty much they're listed in the builds they don't proc for. So if you're running pure female, you won't be able to proc bleed, you won't be able to proc weakness, so it's basically the equivalent of a total attack skill. I would suggest, of course, prioritizing this stuff above total attack though when you're buying it, because perhaps you'll want to change build and you'll want to cover multiple synergy types. So for the same reason as that, this stuff could in practice go above something like this for most people. Realistically, that's actually what I'd do myself, but it doesn't really fit what I'm trying to do with the chart in terms of like what boosts this synergy type of each one the most. But I think when you have your build set up, I'd then probably, assuming you flex to the other builds occasionally, especially if you're like female or weakness, you can fill out these other types, because they can help more with the special effects for rally filling and whatnot in the likes of AC or KVK or CCS also. And then below that it's just pretty obvious with the total stats of declining value. Troop attacks is this low because it's basically the exact same functionality as gold attacks at 9. It's just a bit higher at the top end. So you see there, it just has spear attack, and then the sort of spear attack leeching effect where it takes it from the enemy and adds it to yourself. But that's the exact same as gold attacks have at 9 themselves. It's just 16% instead of 20% at the top, and 6.4% instead of 8% at the top. So if you have everything set up, this is potentially good for like mono builds or something like that. The problem is for what you have to invest to get it to 9 compared to everything else above it, it's just really, really not worth the investment at all, in my opinion. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. As I said previously, I have done a lot of testing and got ideas to compare certain skills and do report analysis on them, especially with the more synergy specific stuff, so keep an eye out for that stuff. Just as a general idea in terms of prioritization, this is how I would approach dragon skills for each of the synergy types.